An example was that I used just recently from the, town council's considering, providing an ordinance that large properties, certain size properties in large zones can be converted to bed and breakfasts. And you happen to own one of these large houses on a large piece of land. Is that something you should not participate, recuse from, which we're going to come to? And I think that's the thing. If you've got only one of 5 or 6 or 10 of these in the whole town, parcels that will fit, then yes, you should be recusing. If there are 40 or more of these in town that could apply, then you don't have to recuse. It's a general benefit. It's the same thing like with the IBM example. That's referring to like thinking if IBM is bidding on a contract. If you're just going to do something which is going to improve, you're going to do something which will later lead to an RFP at which computer firms may be applying, then you don't have that conflict. So, the thing to remember about it is it's the perception aspect as well, that people could say, maybe you don't think you're going to get a benefit, but people would, or a detriment, Maybe your boss is not going to fire you if his company doesn't get the contract, but how are people to know that? They perceive it. If you're working for someone, the conflict applies to you as well. So what do you do if you have a conflict? Actually, I know what I want to talk about too. There's a situation that comes up often with people who are members of nonprofit or a church or something like that. And you're a member of your church finance committee, and you've got a plan to sell off a piece of land to raise money for a soup kitchen. And that selling off of land needs to go to the planning board for a subdivision. And you're a member of the subdivision, of the planning board. That's a situation where you should be recusing yourself. And there's a fairly easy test, which is if you are just a member of the organization, if you are a member of that church, it's not a conflict. But if you are part of the vestry or on the finance committee or some sort of governing board, same thing, for example, here in Barrington, the YMCA. An awful lot of the people in government are members of the YMCA. The YMCA was before several different bodies of government for various approvals. If you're just a member of the YMCA, no, you don't have to recuse yourself. If you're on the building committee or the finance committee or some governing body part of the YMCA, then you recuse yourself, as people did. Likewise, if you had a business interest, if you were doing something as a contractor for the YMCA, if you were bidding on the job or had already received it or in a regular business relationship. So you should look for that as well. So when you do have a conflict, what you need to do is recuse yourself most of the time. And there's a specific form, and I think you all have that form that says, what your name is and what body you are with, and what the matter is that's before you, and you have a conflict because. I have a conflict because Joe Smith is my brother-in-law, or whatever it is. And you check the box that says recuse. And you have 2 copies of that. One stays with your body. It should be with the keeper of the records of your body. It can either be in a separate file of here's all the recusal forms, or it can go in the particular file for each of the matters. But your body should be able to locate that. And another copy goes to the Ethics Commission so that it's disclosed. Again, when we're coming back to the beginning, the public knows, okay, this person's got an issue here. There is a separate block on that recusal form which says you can check, and it's a recusal form, but you're not recusing. So you're saying, I am not recusing because. Now, if it's one of these things by law that says, if it's your brother-in-law, you don't have any choice. You have to recuse. You have to check the recusal button. Well, let's say it's your first cousin. That kind of creates the appearance. People might think, well, he's a related, and by the way, your first cousin has the same name as you, too. You're both named for the common grandfather. People are going to say that. Probably the best thing to do is recuse, but if you're not, at the very least, you want to make sure you're checking the box and saying, I'm not recusing because he is not a family member, only a first cousin, and I have limited contact with him. I don't see him more than every couple of years at funerals and weddings. So there's that. There's the other situation, which is the area of the appearance of impropriety, where There's no relationship or anything like that. But Rhode Island's a small state. It's a small town. You've got your buddy. You and he have been friends since high school together, hanging out together. You go on vacations together with your family, and everybody knows that. And now he's coming before your board. That's another case where you should recuse. You don't have to, but you should recuse because of the appearance. What are people going to say? Oh, of course he's going to give it to him. They're his best friends. And it can work the other way too. You've got someone you've got a blood feud with that's been going on for 5 years, and everybody in town knows that. And that person comes before you. Well, obviously, the appearance is going to be that you're going to deny it because you've got a feud against this guy. So what you want to do with that case is recuse. When you do recuse, fill out the form, walk away from the table. Recusing is not participating at all. You're not asking questions. You're not up there. You're not part of the process. We recommend, as a best practice, leave the room. Ideally, if you know it's ahead of time, get it scheduled at the end of the meeting so you can go home early. But whatever, best thing to do is get away from the room. Next best thing, sit in the back. Believe it or not, there was a complaint, is valid, of a particular town council, not here, a particular town council president recused herself and sat right over in the front row, and effectively by hand signals and grunts was basically conveying her will to the rest of the council, and someone filed a complaint about it. So don't be in that position. Don't even have the temptation. Go to the back of the room at the least. If not, if you can, go home. Abstaining is not the same thing. Abstaining is nothing to do with recusal. Abstaining is simply where you're not voting on something. And there might be a reason, for example, you haven't been to enough of the meetings, you don't feel you've got enough information to make the decision. That's really the situation where you would be abstaining on something, or perhaps you might have a conscientious objector reason for abstaining. But that's not enough. That's not recusal, and that's still allowing participation. The other thing to remember is abstaining is effectively a vote most of the time. It's effectively a negative vote. The lack of a positive vote still works. We had this, if you're on a zoning board, you got to have 5 votes. You really can't abstain on the zoning board because it's the same as a no. And that works in other cases where a particular majority is required. So abstaining is not enough. And abstaining is where you might be sitting at the table and it's only at the end you think, well, I just don't have enough to make the vote. No, recusal is get out of there right at the beginning. You shouldn't be there at any part of the hearing. So, and if something comes up during the hearing that you didn't know about, okay, it happens occasionally. I can't think of an example offhand, but if something comes up during the hearing, well, all right, you've got someone who's an applicant before you. They're not related to you. They're not near you or whatever. And there's a big crowded room, and halfway through the applicant's case, they call up their landscape architect, which, oh, by the way, the landscape architect is your brother-in-law, or the landscape architect is someone you have a business relationship. Then that's the point of there's, excuse me, if this person, I just learned that this person is going to be testifying to the applicant, I need to recuse myself. Get up, fill out the form, and leave at that point. So, questions? Recusal? Conflict? Appearance of impropriety deals with that question of voting. And I'm on page 5 if people want to follow along here. That's one case where there's appearance of impropriety, where there isn't technically a conflict with refusal, but you should still recuse. The other big issue that we come up a lot is the question about ex parte communication. So, ex parte communication, in its simplest explanation, is contact related to something that's going on or should be going on in a meeting outside the realm of that meeting. And if someone with an interest in the decision is attempting to influence or secure your vote one way or another outside of that public meeting, that's ex parte communication. And it's a violation of the Open Meeting Act. It might be a violation of other statutes. If they're trying to influence you with gifts or money, it's going to be fraud. And it's also, it's improper as far as the public confidence. And this is perhaps the time when I will say something I always try to get out. realize that for most people, you are the contact that they will have with the government. We don't, most of us realize that initially because we're the government junkies. We wouldn't be here to begin with. We wouldn't be volunteers on the boards. We wouldn't be elected officials. We watch the news. We read the paper. We go to meetings just because we're interested in what's happening. But that's not most of the people. Most of the people, their contact with government is if they come in to pay their taxes personally instead of mailing it. Or with one of you, they get a notice that there's a hearing before the zoning board or a hearing before the planning board, or something's come up at the school with their kids and they're going to the school committee, or they get a notice of the zoning amendment. You know, you're their contact. You're their version of government. And almost nobody is going to be up at the State House and really see the legislature, unless their channel breaks, their clicker breaks while they're flipping through and see it on public access. So they don't see that. They don't see the federal. It's local, and it's you, whatever level you are. So people's view of government as a whole is going to be strongly influenced by how you treat them and what perception. And if their perception is, oh, the deal's already been made, it's been done in private, it's just going to reinforce natural cynicism. And in the end, it's going to hurt the democracy, it's going to hurt all of us. So it's important that all of you just give that impression that no, we haven't made the decision. We're considering it here, and we're only considering it on the items that were brought before us at this meeting. If you cared enough to come and sit through this meeting, you've seen and heard everything that we got a chance to see and hear. So
let me give you like a real world issue now. This is from when I was on the zoning board, and I know a lot of people here on the zoning, planning, or conservation commission, where as part of your role, you need to know what the property looks like. You're doing a site inspection. And when I first got on the zoning board, I wanted to see every property. I got out of the car, I walked around, I tried to look out for the dog poop in everyone's yards, and I wanted to see everything. Well, then what started happening is, around Barrington, if it's someone strange to the neighborhood, and you start walking around, well, people come out. The property owner will come out, and then they want to talk to you. Oh, let me show you what I want to do. And then the neighbor is next door, and they see that you're on the zone. They see that you are talking to their neighbor, and they have an objection to what their neighbor is doing, and they don't even know who you are. Then they come to the zoning board meeting, and then they look, and they're like, oh, this guy, this stranger in the neighborhood the other day, geez, that guy's on the zoning board. He was talking to my neighbor, the applicant, that I hate his guts, and I don't want him to put up this thing. And that happened once, and I just said, from then on in, I'm doing drive-bys, I'm not getting out of my car, I'm not going around, and I would tell people when I was chair, is that if you have something in your property that's not available, that's not visible from the street, it's your obligation to bring pictures, or bring something to show us what it looks like, because other than Tom Crowley, who since deceased, but he used to love walking with his dog on everyone's property, it's impossible to really see that. So I think for those of you who are chairs of those boards, I would suggest staying off people's property or going deep into them with the owner, because that appearance of impropriety might be there. But to tell the applicant, you really need to make us see somehow through demonstrative aids at the hearing what we would have seen had we done an inspection of a site inspection of your property.
absolutely. In fact, this is bullet 4 on page 6. I'll get to it in a minute. Which talks about refraining from private field trips with an applicant or his or her representative. The best practice is if you go as an entire public body or a subcommittee, and it's a defined site visit, and it's a meeting, and that's a posted meeting. It means you post a notice of the Attorney General, you post it here, planning board will be going to visit such and such a subdivision on such and such a street at 10 a.m. Saturday morning. So you got to visit, that way people know. Most of the time nobody shows up anyway, but if they want to, it's there, they know it, they can come, they can participate in it. And the next best practice, I think, as Jeff's saying, is probably the practical thing with the zoning board. Okay, you just drive by, you look at it yourself. And then if it comes up that there is something that you can't tell and you need to see it, that's when you continue the meeting and say, okay, we need to continue this because we need to do a site visit. If you haven't gotten the photos, you haven't got the information, and there's something that needs to see it, then you continue it and you can do a scheduled visit. But you really don't want to be walking on private property alone. Either just be doing the drive-by, or if you're going to be going on, make it an official site visit for just those reasons. So, June, you were...
Elected officials have ex parte conversations all the time, and that's okay, right?
Well, I'm going to get to that because I'm going to go back up here. And this is the other real typical thing is you're in the supermarket, right? Or you're in the CVS or the library, and somebody comes up to you and says, God, that's a terrible project that's going in with that bank. I hope you're going to vote against it. You know, and the next person says, you know, that's a wonderful project. This town needs that. You're going to vote for it, right? And there are two separate sets of rules for elected officials versus everybody else. Although the goal is the same. Okay? The goal here is that ex parte, this is at the top of page 6, ex parte communications should neither be concealed nor disregarded. Rather, they should be set out on the record so that their substance may be disputed and commented upon. Okay? So, with elected officials, and particularly if you ever hope to be elected again, you can't say to someone, no, I don't want to hear it, don't tell me anything about it. Okay? If you're on the zoning board or the planning board, it's easier to at least try that and say, look, yeah, you can't be telling me this now, I have to hear this, you have to come to the meeting and speak. And the response, oh, no, I don't want to go to a meeting. Well, send a letter. Send a letter to the secretary of the board, or send it to the town hall. Send a letter if you don't want to come to the meeting, but I can't really do it. No, I got to tell you. So you end up with that. And actually what we see a lot more now is the unsolicited email. You open up the email, and there's someone's email telling you in very strong terms why something should be approved or denied. And now the email is there. What do? Same thing. Forward that email to the secretary of your board or the town clerk or the superintendent's office. Forward it there and have them print it out and have it as part of the meeting packet so that everybody can see it and know about it. Or even maybe as simple too, if it's a small thing, if it's the talk and someone said it to you and it's something you think might be interested. Someone said, you know, I really think there's a swamp out in back there. Then say that, you know, I was approached by someone who wouldn't give me his name, or I was approached by Tom Smith and he said that there's a swamp in back. Now you've got it out on the public. Now, yes, it started as ex parte communication, but you've got it in public. And, okay, Mr. Applicant, what do you think? Do you have a swamp? Is there, you know, and maybe everybody else on the board chimes in. Yeah, I've always heard that too. And maybe we need an engineer to tell us there isn't. Maybe you've already got an engineer or a site visit, but you've got it out in public. You've cured the problem by getting it out in public. And so as far as the elected officials, I think it's really just more of a degree. You probably actually have to spend a few more minutes listening to these people before you get to the thing of saying, you know, that's all very nice, but I'm keeping an open mind. Why don't you come to the hearing? And then when they say no, well, please send something in writing. And if they send it to you and not to the clerk, again, get it to the clerk, get it on the record so that you avoided the problem. Further stuff on ex parte? Let's take a short break. The shorter the break, the sooner we can get back. How about, I've got 26 minutes of 8. How about 20 minutes of 8? 6 minutes for a break. There's just, before we move on, I want to mention two things that, regarding some of the stuff that we covered that I didn't hit before, I just want to mention that were in my notes after listening to Mike Field. The key for almost all of you on the Public Records Act thing is to remember the one thing you're going to have to watch out for is that someone gives to you what they think is a request for records. Now remember, it doesn't have to be on a set form. So if someone sends to you, whatever your position, chairman of the board or even just a board member or something, they send you something and they're asking for these documents and say, please, you know, I would like these particular records. I believe they're public records, please give them to me. That's a public records request. And the key thing is you've got to get it to the right person because as you heard, there's a very short time frame, 10 business days. So it's real simple. If it's something dealing with criminal records, it's the police chief. And that's probably only going to come that way anyway. It's not going to come to anyone else. In Barrington, we made it simple. For the town side, it goes to the town manager. So your job is to get that right away. If you have any thought at all that, gee, this might be thought of as a request for records, get it to the town manager. so that he can deal with it, log it in, make sure there's a response within the 10 days, or if they need more time, if they've asked for more time within 10 days, or if we don't have that information at all, as you heard, you have to respond and say we don't have it. Another community I represent got in trouble. Someone came into the clerk's office, asked for 5 things. Clerk's office gave 3 of them right away, said the other one's downstairs in the treasurer's office, and we don't have this last one. The people went away. Next thing you know, there's a letter from the Attorney General complaint. We did not respond to their request for items 4 and 5. And, well, we didn't, because we did not respond in writing. So, there you go. Now, a response in email can be writing, a written response, but you got to have a record of it. You got to make sure that you've got a record, particularly if you came in by email. But again, none of you have to worry about it. It's mainly your job is to make sure it gets to Peter quickly so that he can deal with it in time. Don't wait till the 9th day to send it to Peter. Okay? That's your big responsibility under the Public Records Act. The other thing I'm going to just mention, we were talking about with open meetings and everything, and it's just, yes.
Before you go on, if you are confronted with perhaps someone you might even recognize, or someone from town may present to you a request in writing and recognizing you as an elected official, is it not appropriate to say you really need to present this to the person designated as a public record officer for the town?
Yes.
And have them present it so that the person who accepts it can, in effect, properly and appropriately get the request into the pipeline?
I'll give you my usual answer, which is yes and no. I mean, I don't know, who are you having for the school department? Do you have one designated person? Is it going to be the superintendent?
Goes to Ron.